Hello, awesome people. I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're taking a look at the novel Exile by Salvatore, which I read partially when I was coming back from my trip in Israel recently. I knocked out 100 pages on it on the trip back, and then I knocked out the next 200 pages over the next 2 days, 100 pages each day. So it took me about 3 days and about 6 hours total for me to read it. It's just a little over 300 pages long, and it was pretty quick. It is the middle book in the Dark Elf trilogy that is a prelude sequel to the first 3 books that we've already done a review for you. The Icewind Dale trilogy that kicked things off in the 80s, and then they have been reprinted since then. We're taking a look at this. I bought this stuff as soon as it came out because I loved it so much. I went to the Forgotten Realms series of books from the Dragonlance after reading the first 6 books in the Dragonlance series, Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. I loved it, and so then I went and picked up the first couple books on the shelves. The first book, Dark Walker on Moonship by Douglas Niles, and then this book, Crystal Shard by R.A. Salvatore, his first book that he had ever published. And R.A. Salvatore has had a great career so far. He's had 22 bestsellers on the New York Times. He's definitely somebody everybody knows in fantasy. And his character of Dritz the Warden, that's in this series, is one of the most influential of that generation from the 80s and the 90s. He definitely had a lot of characters in a lot of Dungeons and Dragons and probably other groups, probably other RPGs too, characters that were based on Dritz the Warden. Dritz the Warden is a ranger from the Underdark, where he lives with his evil race of people, but he's a good guy, so he sort of has a little bit of an anti-hero, but he's a good guy, not somebody who regularly does bad things. So he's definitely more of a good guy. And this story tells us, this trilogy rather, the second book of which is Exile, tells the story of his three separate chapters, if you will, of his time before we met him in the 3 books that we've already reviewed for you. This second book is telling the exile of him after he leaves his homeland of Menza Branson, where he's being raised. At the end of the first book, he decides to leave and head on out, and now this is his exile as he heads out into the Underdark. And at the end of this chapter, he'll leave and go up for chapter 3 in the sunlight. And those are the sort of in Sojourn, which I'm reading right now. I'm about 100 pages into it after knocking out about 100 pages last night. So I've been knocking this out at a pretty quick clip. For you folks. I definitely go back and reread this stuff occasionally here and there because I like to refresh my memory and so forth. It's a lot of fun, but I haven't gone back and reread it since I started this channel a few years ago, so now I'm adding these works to my channel. As a reminder, my channel's name, Worst Thing About New Things, the Worst Thing About New Books, rather, is a quote by a French philosopher named Jacques Joubert, who's the worst thing about new books was that they kept you from reading the old ones. And so books that were originally published in the 80s and 90s are decades old by now, right? So that's definitely something that's sort of in the queue of where I like to find some of these older books. I also will read older works from fantasy, science fiction, and horror from decades ago or centuries ago in some cases. And I really enjoy it. So I like to go back and reread a lot of these things that I read when I was a kid, to go back and now reread it and see what do I think of it now, somebody who's, in my mid-40s. I think there's a lot of value in doing that. So I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. It's definitely strong. The character Dritz the Warden is a ranger from an evil race. He feels a little bit like a combination of one of the key characters from the Middle Earth series, Lord of the Rings. Aragorn, who is a ranger and creates the ranger archetype, the good guy tracker of things and can slip around and sneaky and more things. And he's a good guy. And then you have the wilderness good guy, and then you have the another guy who debuted a couple decades later, a generation later, Elric by Michael Moorcock, who was this king of an evil race of people known as the Melnibians, and he had pangs of consciousness, and so he is now going out there and fighting the good fight. So he feels like it's a combined version of both of those, if you will, which definitely was a big hit for this next, and now another generation later on. And so that's where I think the big hit of Dritz the Warden comes from, combining 2 big characters from 2 previous generations into one. So that was pretty cool. The character changes over time in book 5 from book 1. even though it's a prelude. The understanding of who the character is, he's more brooding, he's more introverted, and then the extroverted happy-go-lucky ranger that he is presented as in the first book. So that's pretty cool, and that changes over time. R.A. Salvatore used to be my favorite writer after I started reading The Lord of the Rings, and then I moved to other fantasy works because I wanted to keep it up with the genre. He was my favorite writer after J.R. Tolkien, and then my favorite writer before Michael Moorcock. So he's sandwiched between those two fantasy writers that are highly influential. So there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. Have you read Exile by R.A. Salvatore, the 5th book that he wrote overall, and the 2nd book in the series? If so, what'd you think of it? Would you also give it a 7 out of 10, better or worse? Would you like to talk about some of the spoilers? Because again, I keep my reviews spoiler free. So if you want to talk about spoilers, let's talk about them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, why not hit that subscribe button? There's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.